Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, death slaves, hearse, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, hackers. I'm useful to you. Welcome. And let's go into this whole story about Russian hacks. I'm sorry I'm laughing, but I just think this whole thing is so preposterous. And the fact that we have all these adults and all these people in power and all these important people talking as if this whole thing is even credible is just beyond belief. And of course, it's a convenient narrative for the Hillary Clinton campaign, failed Hillary Clinton campaign, and of course her whole base. They can go in this whole idea that it's because of the Russians. And of course that overlooks the whole fact that the leaks are all true. It's all a bunch of her dirty laundry, and no matter who leaked it, I mean, it's all true, and it's all crappy stuff about Hillary and the Clintons and the way the media works and how the Democratic National Committee works and everything else and how they ran their election. And so they, once again, the Democrats have, and Hillary have nobody to blame but themselves. But this whole thing with the Russians, I remember the FBI dismissing the whole idea, and then now we have the CIA coming out and claiming that the Russian hacks happened, and now we got the FBI jumping back in and saying, oh yeah, actually that is true. And then, like I say, we have NSA officials that haven't really said anything, and they're the Mac Daddies. I mean, they would know, theoretically, since they have the global surveillance network going on, they would know. And but anyway, let's go back to this whole idea that there's these Russian hacks. First of all, this whole idea that there's any evidence. It looks like there's about zero. And let's run through some of the things that have popped up in articles. German officials said that Russia did this hack, and then German communications, and then passed on to WikiLeaks. But as it turns out, it was leaked by an insider in the German Bundestag. NSA officials talked about a Russian hack, and then they found out it was actually an inside leak by NSA insiders. William Binney, who designed the NSA system, and Ray McGovern, who was a member of the CIA for 27 years, said that these documents were leaked by insiders, not hacked by Russia. And that's the point everybody's trying to make here. There was no hacks, they were leaks, and that's an important distinction. And this whole idea that the Russians hacked, and Obama even coming out and saying that Putin himself personally handled it, just because nothing happens in Russia without Putin knowing about it. Certainly there's a lot of things that are happening in America that Obama doesn't know about, or anyone else. But anyway, then we go on to a British agent that said he personally met the leaker, a member of the American NSA, that personally passed him the information. And then also, even by remote chance anything was traced to, say, Russia, fake initiation IP points are not hard to do. It's pretty much child's play, I guess, for most hackers. According to the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology, that's basically hacking 101. So even if there was any kind of hacking and then it was traced back to Russia, I mean, it would be a dubious distinction. And once again, I go back to the fact that it doesn't really matter who hacked, because what the material was true. And I also understand that, at least from what I've read, that perhaps one reason why mostly material got released about the Democrats is because their protection systems weren't as good. That may or may not be true. But anyway, let's go back to the evidence, the so-called evidence about Russian hacking. Then we have James Cardin, former advisor to the U.S.-Russia Presidential Commission at the U.S. State Department, and he's come out and talked about it and said evidence of a connection between the Russian government and the hackers remains illusory. There is zero technical evidence to connect any hackers to the Russian government, unquote. And then there's this assumption that the Russian state hacking would be so primitive that it could be traced back to not only Russia but Putin himself. I would suggest that the security intelligence apparatus in Russia is sophisticated enough that they can come in and out, same way the United States can go in and out of systems all over the world without being detected. And then we have a joint statement by DNI and DHS on October 7th, 2016, said U.S. intelligence had no evidence of official Russian involvement, saying only the leaks were consistent with the methods and motivations of Russian-directed efforts. What a bunch of bullshit. Oh yeah, it sounds like the Russians, so it must be them. That's basically the kind of evidence we're getting here. It sounds like the Russians, so it must be them. I'll take it a step further and say we need it to be the Russians, so it must be them. Obama said, quote, "Not much happens in Russia without Putin," unquote, and called Putin the former head of the KGB. And he wasn't the head of the KGB, so whether that point matters or not. But he basically said that there's the evidence I can't show you because it's classified and we're not going to provide it. And then talking about this whole idea that Putin got personally involved and has a personal vendetta against Hillary Clinton. I mean, that just sounds ridiculous. I don't know. I don't think Putin has a personal vendetta against anyone in the United States at this point. This whole Russian boogeyman story, of course, I've addressed before, but it's just crazy. And the fact that Trump is being demonized by wanting to not demonize Russia anymore and work with them as a global partner, I think is a good move and should be applauded by everyone on the so-called left and the so-called right. And yet, because we have the status quo and a clueless base, they're all worried about the Russian threat and how to treat it. So really strange. But like I say, the NSA remains silent. We can't really trust the CIA. For example, they spent years lying about torture, as a lot of articles are pointing out. Julian Assange came out and pointed out once again it's a leak, not a hack, and that's something to be an important distinction. And now, of course, the CNN, the Clinton News Network, has come out and said that the House Intelligence Committee is now saying that Edward Snowden is actually working with the Russians, and that's how this all happened. And so that's ridiculous too. Once again, trying to cover their embarrassment that an activist working in the U.S. government doesn't like what he finds, leaks it, and then now is on the run and fears for his life. And now, of course, he's working with the Russians, because that could be the only rational explanation why an American would turn his back on his government. That would at least be the government narrative. And then, of course, one of the things that I brought up in videos before, and everyone's brought up, and I'll attach videos below, is just the hypocrisy, considering the U.S. history of intervening in elections all over the world for decades and decades and decades. And so the idea that the Russians hacked and released some dirty laundry is pretty mild stuff compared to what the United States has done, planning agent provocateurs and encouraging acts of terrorism and out and out manipulation. It just goes on and on. It's still going on now. And you know, nobody wants to talk about Hillary's undermining the Bernie Sanders campaign. I mean, you want to talk about the effects on the Hillary campaign. I think liberals, instead of being angry about Trump and all this stuff about Russian hacks and everything, they should be looking closer at Hillary undermining the Bernie Sanders campaign. And then the bottom line, like I say, is just here we have all this partisan nonsense in both bases, wanting to believe the narrative. And then, you know, like I say, the bottom line is you look at the people who are lining up. It's a disgruntled and shocked liberal base. It's a disgruntled and shocked Hillary campaign, status quo Democratic Party, and then of course the usual losers like John McCain and Lindsey Graham coming out and siding with this whole idea about the Russian boogeyman, because they're the last vestiges of the neocon theory in our government. But John McCain, of course, embarrassing himself as usual, saying that, quote, you know, Russia may destroy our democracy, unquote, and quote, we need to get to the bottom of this, unquote. So here we go again, you know, a witch hunt and a show trial bred in a circus for the masses, this Russian witch hunt going on in Congress. Once again, they're going to have hearings about bullshit and carry the charade on for a little bit further, when there's a lot of other things I think Americans would rather have hearings about, things that need to be aired out, and not some bullshit boogeyman nonsense story coming about evil Russian hackers, Boris Badenoff and Natasha. And so what's the motive? What's the motive of this bullshit Russian hacking story? Well, of course, it's to discredit. I think the bottom line that I'm not sure if people are talking about is to discredit all the content of Podesta emails. Somehow the fact that the Russians leaked this and nobody wants to, particularly in the Democratic side, they don't want to talk about the content of the Podesta emails and everything it's told us. And then also, of course, the biggest thing is, of course, to discredit Trump. Discredit Trump at every turn. And just leave Trump alone. If he's going to fuck up, he'll do it all by himself. There'll be plenty of meat to go after. And then one of the other bottom lines is the media is saving face. The media can say, oh, yeah, well, we had it all right about Hillary and the election, but we didn't factor in those evil Russian commie bastards coming in here and fucking everything up. So that's the bottom line. Once again, the Democrats have nobody to blame but themselves for the fact that Hillary lost and Trump won. There was virtually no voter fraud. The release of this material had zero effect on this election in the sense that it's the truth. What can you do about it? Could have easily been the other way around and then everything would be fine. But anyway, God, enough about this bullshit Russian hacking story. Once again, I'll eat my hat, and I got lots of hats. If something about this connection to Russia turns out to be even remotely true. But until then, I'm just going to be scratching my head. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.